I wanted to go ahead and remind you the abstracts for the poster competition, for the plant breeding symposium poster competition, are due on Sunday. You can turn them in by midnight on Sunday. If you'll have any questions about the poster competition, Dr. Smith has a question.
No, I don't have a question about the poster. I just wanted to give us an update on how many people have registered for the symposium and what we're expecting.
So far, I think we have about 150 registrants overall. That's including the web.
How many will the room hold?
150, but we only have 100 people signed up to come in person. So we have 150 T-shirts. So sign up so you can...
You have 149 because you've already given me one.
Okay, so we have 146 because I took a couple too. So sign up so you can claim a T-shirt. So if you have any other questions, please ask Brian or Ann in the back over there, or Sean Carver. He's not here, but you can ask him or email us. So, Dr. Jessup.
All right, Laura was very, yes.
One quick announcement. We have a prospective student, David Horn, who's coming here from North Carolina State, getting his master's with policy. Please introduce yourself after
That's a good idea. We have a full house as usual. I thank you all for that. We're lucky to have very business corporate relations individuals here today. Bob Avant, the director of that office, and Diane out of this department now up there as well, representing us very well. If y'all aren't familiar, they're responsible for building public-private partnerships. So our interactions with the industry, trying to bring in funds and partnerships for research. All right. With that, I'll leave it to Bob.
So thanks a lot, Russell. Where's the clicker here? Is that it? Or no?
We have
Just use computer?
yes.
Here we go. Well, again, thanks for inviting us. We always like to come talk to groups like this because the Corporate Relations Office, although we're, I guess, 8 years old now, still a lot of people haven't heard what we do. And we have a very big role with soil and crop sciences. In fact, of all the projects we manage, most of them, the majority of them are with soil and crop sciences, and a few major projects we'll talk about in a minute. But what we are a dedicated channel link to corporations with AgriLife research and our faculty, as Russ pointed out. And we work on collaborative team partnerships, deliverable-driven research projects. We assign a project manager to a specific project if it's a large enough project, and we focus on intellectual property. And I'll say this right now, my computer won't boot up for a project less than $500,000. And so, I'm being blunt there, but to bring these resources to bear, you need a large project, multi-year project, usually multi-team project that need a lot of project management. And we'll get into why that's important in a minute. If it's a project that's less than $500,000, we may still work on it, especially if it's going to tee up a project that's $1 million or more long term. If it's a project that's a $100,000 project, that project's more appropriately managed, say, in the department. You don't need too many cooks in the kitchen for a project like that. So that's the rationale on how we engage with projects. What Dianna and I want to talk to you about today are three things. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the research funding scenario, so you understand the dynamics are out there now. I'll talk about that, and how you engage with CR, and how it works, and then our presence out there, and I'll wrap up with that conversation. So funding of research, and this is not news to anyone in this room, I think, but we can no longer depend on state or federal research. It used to be that Texas A&M University was a state-supported university. Then with budget cuts, we were state-assisted. Now we're state-located. And so, so funding has gone down. About 30% of the funding for the A&M programs in AgriLife is about 30% state dollars. So that means we have to make up a lot of money there to stay viable. And so it's as the second bullet point says there, Texas and federal support is now at about a third of what it was 10 years ago, about 30%. So those alternative funding sources could include corporations, foundation, and royalties. And since corporate relations was created, we've had a lot of projects brought in. Talk about that a little bit farther. I would like to give credit to this concept to a former department head here in Soil and Crop Sciences, who was at the time a director of the Farmer Experiment Station. And this would have been in late 2007. And he saw the writing on the wall that earmarks were going to go away, federal funds were going to be significantly reduced. And at the time, Dr. Hussey said, I want to see our corporate funding, our private funding, go from single digits to double digit financing. In other words, somewhere around 7% to say 15 or more percent of our total mix. And he set that as a challenge, and that's one of the reasons why corporate relations was created. So a lot of this vision goes back to Dr. Hussey. So since our inception in 2007, and a lot of this started off with a bioenergy program, and we were so successful in setting up several major bioenergy projects, we morphed it, if you will, into a corporate relations activity, and it's been very successful. Ups and downs depending on the funding cycles. You'll see a couple of really big years like 2008 and 12 where we landed some major projects, and so it bounces all around. But over the course of the program, we have managed over $70 million in new projects. So a pretty significant area. It's resulted in almost 400 invention disclosures, about 100 commercial licenses. And so the intellectual property developed with emphasis on corporate relations has been significant also. So why is IP important? The bottom line is it demonstrates due diligence on the part of the researcher to protect intellectual property that researcher is developing. Now, there is a mindset at this university, or was, we're changing a little bit, that A&M is a land grant university, it's a public university, it's funded by public funds, so any intellectual property we develop ought to be given away. In other words, it ought to be, if we develop a new variety of corn, that ought to be put out there on the public domain, and it ought to be given away for the benefit of the farmers and ranchers of the state of Texas. That is a mindset that's out there. Not too many people understand that in state law, it says that if you use a state tax dollar to develop intellectual property, you shall protect that intellectual property. And so not a lot of people know that, so we're under law to protect intellectual property developed in A&M. And every university system has to develop an intellectual property management system. And so in addition to developing that due diligence, it's also important to comply with the law, but more importantly, by generating that intellectual property, protecting it, and getting it licensed, that allows royalty funds to flow back to that researcher for that researcher's program. So it becomes very important personally to develop those, that intellectual property portfolio and to go through the process. And if you haven't done that, and I'll just give a plug for technology, TTC, the Technology Commercialization Office, you can go on their website and they have a disclosure form that you can disclose your invention. Now, if you've already published on it, then you can forget it because you've lost the opportunity to protect that information. So if you've got a really neat idea that you're sitting in the lab someday or in the field and say, man, this is going to be kick butt, don't publish on it until you've disclosed it so you can protect that intellectual property because that'll flow back as royalty to you. So that's very important to remember that. But all those are important reasons, but we're required to do it by law. So I mentioned some of the $70 million projects. Here they are. Chevron and BP were two of the big ones. Ceres was another one that Dr. Rooney is leading with development of bioenergy sorghums and sweet sorghums. A lot of these started off being bioenergy, Chevron, BP, and Ceres. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but price of oil has dropped precipitously. If you build up your pickup truck in the last month, you're highly aware of that. Well, the Chevron project started in '07 and BP started about 2 years later, and both of those projects are winding down. And BP will end in March, and Chevron will end in December. I don't think I have to explain to anybody why that's happening. They're basically out of the bioenergy business, and as long as oil is at $40-some-odd a barrel, they're going to stay out of the bioenergy business. If you're responding to members of boards of directors, they're looking at the bottom line. Having said that, there's still interest in having carbon-friendly production in your portfolio. So if there's a bioenergy crop that helps produce biofuels or a bioproduct that is carbon-friendly, and most of them are compared to fossil fuels, then there's going to be some interest in having a part of the portfolio for BP or Chevron or Shell or whoever as renewable. And so it's more of a PR move than it is a economic move, but there are considerations there, and if you go to any one of their websites, they talk about being carbon friendly. So there is going to be a little bit in the biofuels in there. Most of those are online now, either through corn-based ethanol in the Midwest. There are a few lignocellulosic plants and a little bit of biodiesel, so that's going to make up most of it. So again, a fairly big portfolio of both corporate and governmental entities. And there's a mix of those in there. Several very big projects on algae that were funded by the Department of Defense and Department of Energy. One of them is still going on now. Shay Simpson's leading that one on the island of Kauai, which is tough duty. And she has to go there every quarter for a meeting, and so it's that is a fun project. So I'm going to turn it over to Dianna, and she's going to talk about how it works.
Thank you, Bob. Well, I'm going to try and talk about how it works. The issue with so many of these projects and with making them happen is that we have to really respond to the particular needs of the project. And when I came on and was interviewing for the job, my counterpart, I was asking him, so can you explain to me what I'm going to be doing all day long? No, you'll just have to take the job and figure out. So I did, and about a year later, I'm trying to figure it all out. And the first thing we're going to talk about is from your perspective, from the researcher's perspective, what is the benefit of engaging with our office at all? This may seem obvious in some senses. You want to expand a research program because you'll have some additional funding sources if you can successfully work with a company. You also have the opportunity to form relationships with industry peers, and those collaborations are very useful as you may be pursuing grants or even just being able to learn exactly what they're doing. The real key on is that third bullet point, that's a lot of my job, is project management. As Bob mentioned, not every project really needs a project manager. Sometimes it's more complex if we do add one. But if we're talking about many locations and half a dozen or more researchers, it's nice for the company to have a single point of contact to call and get something sorted out when they have an issue. It also builds a student placement structure. We have a lot of companies very interested in taking a look at graduate students, either who they've worked with or they know the program that they came out of. That helps build understanding there. And then it also does offer an outlet for that commercialization of technologies if those come out of the project. Sometimes we have projects that are almost formed around the intellectual property itself. That's happened as well. And then that potential for royalty flow, if you do have commercialization, and royalties can come back into the program. So those are some of the advantages that you might find working with corporate relations. And then just for a little bit of perspective, here three things that you can consider from your industry partners and why it might be useful for them. We're able to directly engage companies that are able to place the new research that we're coming out with. I would say this has been one of the biggest shifts in my thinking. About a year ago in February, I was a graduate student here in this department and finishing up research, and I came into my graduate program hearing all the great things I was going to do with my soil science research. And I just had this idea that when I came up with something great, when I was done with it, someone was going to be there and take it away and it would be wonderful. And the reality is, even after you've finished your research, maybe you've published on it, maybe you've even patented it, sometimes there's a lot more development that needs to be done to get that into people's hands. Bob was talking about the idea that things need to be given away. And maybe sometimes we feel like if we give them away, people will use them. But half the time, the truth of the matter is there's continuing development that needs to be done, and if no one can make a profit off it, it might not end up going anywhere. So it does expedite the development and the time frame for those new technologies, because oftentimes we don't have the funds to continuing developing, and not only do we not have the money, that's not your job to continue the whole phase of development. You have research responsibilities. And then we are able to capture that intellectual property that might not other be protected, licensed, commercialized, and I'd tack on the end of that, it might not be used because, again, a university doesn't have the same ability to place something in the hands of a consumer or a user as a company might in some cases. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our approach, how we try to tackle this thing. We provide outreach to corporations. We do that. We show up at conferences and that type of a thing. But I would say that a lot of that comes from developing projects and personal relationships, and that is an advantage for us. We also have a team that is looking at upcoming funding opportunities, so maybe we can get a little bit of a heads up when funding opportunities are coming at us. We do coordinate these major multi-unit and multi-institutional corporate and federal research projects. We oftentimes collaborate with other universities. That's another time it can be useful to have a project manager when you got a big scale to work with there. And then we support the post-award contract activities. So what does that mean? Well, we're actually going to be in contact with the company. Are we checking over our agreements? Are we in compliance with this? How is the project going, and how do we envision that we can scale it up perhaps in the future? Again, project management for projects where it's useful. It says major there. There's certainly a money component to that. There's also just a complexity component that sometimes we can help with something, and sometimes it's a one-man show and it's easier for you to do it. And then I would say that maintaining that relationship with the clients is very useful, because sometimes you may have a relationship with a company one-on-one, and that will benefit you in the work that you do. But by involving a corporate relations group, you may not be aware of other research that's going on here at A&M. And we may be able to plug them in and meet some more of their needs that you can't do as an individual just because you're busy doing the work as you should be. So a little bit of continuing on that discussion about approach, and this slide really is going to focus in a little more on that technology commercialization. We do work very closely with the Texas A&M Technology Commercialization Office. They're the folks that you're actually going to disclose what your invention or potential invention might be. They're the folks that are going to help license it if it comes to that. And so rather than you knowing exactly who to go to there, having corporate relations as kind of an intermediary can help in some cases. So we do want to identify and develop projects and the intellectual property portfolios that we have. And I would say that this second bullet here is something that TTC, or Technology Commercialization, does a really good job of, and we can also do in some cases about explaining to companies that might be interested in the work that we do have something for them, and then facilitate that intellectual property commercialization there at the last bullet in coordination with the unit heads, the faculty heads, the staff that we have, all trying to bring it in to bear on a project. So these are the what we've listed as our guiding principles here at Corporate Relations, and I'll give you a project while I finish talking. If you can find a word for accessible that starts with an E we'll get never going down here on the side. So be thinking about that. But really, all these principles come into looking a lot more in our reaction time like a corporation would than like a land-grant university would. So being able to respond and meet the needs of that company is very useful. So we are nimble. We do need to be visible and accessible not only to you but also to industry, and responsive so that we're listening to the things that the feedback that we're getting and trying to find solutions for their problems. So we've got a couple of slides here on the process, and again, this is where it gets difficult to nail down, an A, B, C, we always do it this way, but we do try to act as a point of contact for major projects, and again, we're talking about projects that are complex. That allows the communication to flow a little better, and it makes the company feel better when they know one person who they can contact, and we can do the hunting that needs to be done to get the answers to their questions. We are able to, if we have a company that approaches us, kind of take a look around and see what the capabilities and interests of our faculty may be. It's not always that we know of a researcher who's doing something. Sometimes we have to dig a little bit and find to see if we have someone who can meet the needs of industry. And then what we'll often do is provide initial contact with those corporations, and sometimes that's through unit heads and referrals, or just our reputation. So they'll come to us. We do have situations where they've already talked to a researcher, and maybe we can help look at an agreement or something like that. Sometimes we need to obtain a non-disclosure agreement before we start in discussions with the company, so that your research is protected when we begin this discussion. And in other cases, they want the non-disclosure agreement on their side. And this is when we can, with our research before us, we can prepare a topical one-pager, something that's going to generally explain what capability you have. And we can hand that to them so they understand what's going on. At that point, we need to meet with the company. They kind of know what we can do, and it may be that we host them here in College Station or one of the centers if there's a particular need for that. We may go there, and this is when we explain some of the things that we can do, some of the things that Texas A&M has the opportunity or has the ability to do. And once we've had that meeting, we can prepare an executive summary. So this is about a 5-page document. It's more detailed than that one-pager. And what we really want to be doing here is, this is after the meeting, so we can be responding to what we heard in that meeting about what the company wanted, rather than just telling them what we know we can do, because that can get really broad, or it can get overly technical. And then we can review and have some iteration on that executive summary so that they say, no, that's not really what we were trying to accomplish here. Let's back it up and start again. And then we can coordinate a full proposal with the researcher or researcher team and the company itself. Ideally, we'd negotiate a master agreement, and this will help us in future agreements with that company. This would be in coordination with sponsored research services and technology commercialization to try to get appropriate language that's beneficial for both parties. And then, assuming at that point that they've seen that full proposal, we've negotiated successfully a master agreement, they have proposals for work that have gone out, then we'll provide the project management as the researchers begin to meet the needs or to continue working on the scope of work defined in that proposal. Then the progress meetings, whether they be monthly or quarterly, conference calls or something like that, that's something that our office tries to coordinate just so that we know, especially on a complex project with a lot of folks, that everyone's on the same page. And we do offer some financial tracking as well, which is both useful to you and hopefully makes your job a little easier, and also makes the company feel a little better as they know how things are going. So that's the opportunities slide, and I'll turn it back over to Bob to explain a little more about who we are.
Thanks, Diana. And that last slide, and Russ is on the Chevron proposal. I'll tell you a war story. There's a difference between a war story and a fairy tale. Does anybody know the difference? One starts with once upon a time, and the other one starts, this ain't no bullshit. And so you can put this into whatever category you want. But for the Chevron project that I mentioned is just ending in December. The project was a 3-year project. And so our conversations with them started in late I guess 2011. It was funded, I guess, by January of 2012. So 12, 13, 14, I guess it ended up in 15. And so Chevron called and said, we want to focus on some energy grass production development agronomics. And here's what we have in mind. That was the initial meeting. An executive summary was prepared and sent to them. The project manager called me back from Chevron and said, well, you guys actually listen to us. UC Davis doesn't. And so within about 3 months, we started with a initial contact, developed a executive summary, and had a project underway in about 3 months using that project that Dianna just laid out. So it doesn't happen that easily all the time. It's very often that you might do a dance with a company for a year, Seth, or more. And so, but you have to be patient. And so we work through those things and with the idea of landing them. So both Dianna and I have gone through a lot of these things. We have 14 professionals now on staff that do all these areas listed: executive management, government relations, proposal preparation, administration, budgeting, things like that. And they all add up to 150 years of specific experience. The other 13 people take great pleasure in reminding me that I own 40 years of that. But we all work as a team using a corporate approach. And one point I want to make, sorry if I don't leave you with anything else, that when you start working with a corporate entity, you need to take everything you ever knew about developing a proposal for USDA and throw it out the window. Because they don't talk that language, they don't think that way, they don't believe in killing a forest of trees for a proposal. Most of these corporate proposals are 10 pages or less long. A equivalent USDA proposal would be 100 pages long. And so it's an entirely different mindset. They don't want to see citations in there. They don't want to be impressed by a lot of highly scientific talk. They feel that A&M has the background, the knowledge. They don't want to be impressed by the credentials. They want to be impressed by what you can do for them. And so you have to put it in terms of selling it to a corporate vice president that's in charge of the budget. And so identify the problem, lay out how you're going to attack the problem, talk about budget and milestones and deliverables. That's all they want to see. They don't want to see a lot of verbiage. And so that's one of the things that we really focus on. These 5-pagers are the executive summaries. Short, sweet, and to the point. And that's landed well over $40 million proposals doing it that way. And so shift gears when you have a major private proposal. And the other thing that blows people's mind, and I guess everybody in this room knows what IDC stands for, right? The indirect cost, which is if you write a budget, say for your time and materials and travel and all that, then overhead of 46% is applied to that basic budget before it's ever submitted to federal government or whoever. So that's called indirect cost. If you're not familiar with it, you will when you start doing a budget. A lot of people call that a tax. But we have to keep all the lights on. We have to keep the carpet good. We have to have the lab space available. But for a corporation, the IDC, say if it's the USDA, the IDC rate's about 46%. For a corporation, it's 0. Now, you're going to say, now how can that be? Because we take that 46% and we direct budget it by line item. It's still there, but it doesn't show up as a tax. And so some companies are used to working with universities on IDC. Typically companies that work a lot with the federal government, But other companies don't care, don't want to see it. They want to see the line item budget. So you break up lab usage. You can put a small number in there for overhead, but you never see IDC listed on a corporate project because they view it as a tax. So there's some subtleties there about how you navigate that with SRS, but it makes just that one little subtlety makes a huge difference on how you negotiate a corporate contract. One of the reasons why we've been pretty successful at what we do. And so just wanted to leave you with a few of those points. This is the crew, and they all come from different backgrounds. One thing we wanted to do, another reason why I think we were as successful as we've been, is we wanted to bring in people from agriculture that had specific areas of expertise, so that if there is a project related to producing crops, for instance, I want somebody with an agronomy background as a project manager. And so that's Dianna's role. We have another project that is the algae project I mentioned. Has a lot of engineering in there, and the ag engineer leads that as project manager. And we have a person that's from animal science that works on the animal nutrition side. And the importance for that is it's important for the faculty member to know that whoever that project manager is has some basic understanding of the technology. They understand the jargon. They also understand the research process about how research is conducted. They know a little bit about statistics, hopefully, what an R squared is. And so they can communicate with the researcher, but also they can translate that for the company. That go-between becomes really important, and that's a really nice tool that we use. And so all these people have various backgrounds that can be applied there. The other one that I like to call out is Bridget West, and she is just a magician at budgets, and she's been able to develop budgets and then take them through and fast track them through the SRS process, and that can be a long, burdensome process. Basically, they have a first in, first out mentality. So if you've got a $10,000 project or a $10 million project, the one on the top, the bottom comes out first in, first out. And so we were able to put some priority on projects going on that are the big projects. Bridget is really good at budgets, so that when they see it signed off by Bridget, they know it was done right. And so we like to do that. The other person that's unique is Andrea Cuban. She is an attorney that has a lot of project management background and a lot of negotiation background. So she helps us a lot developing those master agreements that Dianna mentioned. And so that's it. And happy to open the floor for the Q&A. Yeah.
You want to explain a little bit better to these guys what IDC is? Because I'm not, if you can give an example maybe, because I find most students are kind of confused by that.
Okay, if you go look at your project, and you can go, there's I'm trying to think the right choice word. There's a drawdown sheet that you can go to develop budgets. Basically, AgriLife research, and you can plug in how many graduate students are working on it, how many full scientists are working on it, how many student workers are on it, what's the travel. It's sort of a plug-and-play type budget, and it calculates all these things. Well, one thing, indirect cost is basically, for lack of a choice of better words, it's the overhead we charge to do business. And so, whenever you figure, okay, I'm gonna have so much of my time on a project, I'm gonna be traveling to and from this plot somewhere once a week, and I'm gonna budget that out. I'm gonna go to a national meeting. I've got so much diesel I'm gonna need for the tractors. I'm gonna have fertilizer for these plots. All those costs are considered to be direct cost. And so those are budgeted. Once you say you come up with a project, and I'll pull math out. Say it's a $100,000 project. Then that's your direct cost, and then 46.5%. I think I'm about the right percent now. It changes a little bit year to year based on audit. then you would add $46,500 to that $100,000 direct cost budget. So the total cost of your budget to total cost of your project to get that project funded would be $146,500. And so that's just one example of how a $100,000 project might evolve in the process. Now, you can, a faculty member can charge less than that in the IDC rate. And if they do, and they say, well, we're not going to charge any, then Dr. Nestler, the director of AgriLife Research, is still going to get his half of it. And so he's going to come get skin out of somebody for his half of it. The department could say, we're not going to charge IDC, and that would come out of the department's skin. But it's an AgriLife Research director's policy that IDC is charged, and the director's office gets part of it, and then the department gets part of it. And of course, that should and could flow back to most time to the research program. So that's how IDC is calculated. How it's calculated in a budget. Where does that number come from? Basically, it's an audited number that is audited by the federal agencies, and they'll come in and say, okay, what is A&M's, if you will, audited rate? And they'll say, okay, what is the cost of space per square foot? What's the cost of electricity? What's the cost of setting up laboratories? All those things that are sort of general in nature. And those are factored into a calculation that's approved every year by the basic federal agencies that fund federal research. And that's where it comes from. Now, to put that into context for you, I have a really good friend of mine. He graduated with me in ag engineering. We both got our bachelor's and master's together a few years ago. And he's now vice president of Alamo Group. Has anybody ever heard of the Alamo Group? You've probably heard of Rhino mowers, right? Or bush hog mowers. They are the company that owns and manufactures that line of equipment, in addition to others. And he said, if we develop, say, a 15-foot batwing mower for a bush hog or rhino, we develop the cost of that, and our markup is 100%. So say it costs $5,000 to manufacture that 15-foot batwing. They're going to market that batwing for $10,000. That's their markup. Well, that's their cost of doing business, if you will. That markup includes the cost of their license structures, the cost of their HR, the cost of all the things that aren't direct cost, and then profit. Now, the reason their number is 100% and ours is 46 is we don't have profit in there. And so that's a distinction there. So if you think about it, I think our 46% is pretty cheap compared to, say, private sector. At one time, I worked for an engineering company as vice president of an engineering company in Austin, Texas, civil engineering firm. And our markup for an engineer, a graduate level engineer, say that engineer, just to pick a number, I was making $50,000 a year. That engineer would be billed at $100,000 a year on a project, on an hourly rate. And so markup is an ordinary part of doing business, and especially big businesses, they understand that. They don't understand IDC. They do understand markup and overhead. And so there's some subtlety there, but it's important when you're working with a big company. Very long answer to a short question, Seth. Did I do it okay for you?
Yeah. There is one exception, though, that's always good to highlight, which is the USDA.
Yeah.
Which pays 33% overhead.
Exactly. He's exactly right. If it's DOE, some other agencies are different. So all the agencies are different. That's quite right. Any other questions? Wayne.
Bob, the Mays Business School has a program where they take ideas, assign a team of people to those ideas, and mostly students, and develop a marketing plan, and then market that marketing plan to companies. Has corporate relations given any thought to developing a similar model where you would take, let's say, Russ has an idea of turning switchgrass into protein pellets and marketing that idea rather than waiting for Russ to develop the protein pellets, and then you market the protein pellets?
The quick answer to that is no. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but typically what we want to do is, if we've got a technology that's ripe, to pick a choice of words, I guess, I want to go directly to Technology Commercialization Office, get that patent in place, and get that out there on the streets, moving pretty fast. And so, Technology Commercialization Office, if it's a real hot, exciting intellectual idea that looks like it could move forward quickly, it can move through the process fairly quickly. Now, it takes you about a year to get a patent, but you can protect it and have patent pending and all that. And so, patenting and protecting the intellectual property is one part of the commercialization process. And so, it depends on where you're at in the process, Wayne, I'd say. But my thinking would be, if the project, if it really looks like it has potential, I want to go ahead and get in the hands of TTC and get them moving on it. Russ, you had
Can you visit a bit on, you mentioned the earmarks going away, discretionary spending is going to continue to decline. How they can do a better job with your first lot of increasing what we're capturing with corporate relations? What can we do?
Well, I'd say this. A good idea is something that's always marketable. And so I'd say if it's an idea you think could be disruptive, revolutionary, something that and is commercializable, if there's such a word in the dictionary, then I'd say we need to talk about it, and a couple things happen. Number one, trying to find somebody to fund it is becoming more of a challenge, but there are also always groups out there. So if there's this great idea out there, we want to go after it. And maybe there's funding for it now, maybe there's not, maybe there's bridge funding for it. Maybe we know of some group that has some interest in a technology or an idea that they'd like to develop. So I'd say, I like to say, I never say no to anything. I want to keep the door wide open to ideas. And I'll tell you right now, because of what's happening with the energy area, we're still going to be doing research and development of say, energy crops, but they're probably going to be repurposed for other things. You mentioned pellets, but maybe some of the great sorghums that Dr. Rooney developed are also real good forage sorghums. And it turns out that is the case. And it turns out a couple of them are really good forage sorghums for the dairy industry because of some of the protein that are in them. That's an example where repurposing maybe is important. But one thing we are doing right now, and it's a strategy we're developing as we speak, and we're going to ask Julie Borlaug to help us with this because she has great direct contacts with the Big Six. And does everybody know what the Big Six is? For you graduate students, you need to know that because you may be working for one of them. And that's basically the Big Six ag companies. I don't know, Dianna, if I'm going to be able to name them all off, but I'll start with Dow, DuPont, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF. Who am I leaving out? Yeah. So those are the Big Six. And they hire a bunch of agronomists. And so remember the Big Six. But we are going back and having outreach with the Big Six, if you will, at the highest level. And so just to say, here are some things we've done. It's been a while since we've talked to you. We've had all of the Big Six on campus. I can remember 6 years ago we had BASF here, and we had a 3-day presentation. Their director, their VP for science, gave a lecture down in the lecture hall down here to students. And so we want to repeat that to get them back on campus to talk about some of the things we've done in the last few years and where there's some matches. So that's one example of some things we want to do that's a little bit different and outside the box. But Russ is exactly right. You need to be thinking about alternative ways of financing projects, and usually there's not just one way. And the problem with governmental projects are that they're governmental projects, and they have a lot of bureaucracy in them usually that you don't see in a corporate project. I like to tell people that I love to search out bureaucracy and I kill it where I find it. Because it's just, it's hard to do good science, conduct good science under the cloud of bureaucracy. And so we work really hard to kill the bureaucracy when we find it around here. Any other questions? Well, we really enjoyed being here, guys. Always do. Thanks much.